Another day, another recap. Today we'll be diving into an action thriller movie titled Without Remorse. Enjoy the recap. The movie opens with a sneak attack on two soldiers. Multiple men hiding in the water emerge, including John Kelly. He is part of an elite Navy SEAL team which is operating in a war-torn Syria. Their lieutenant commander, Greer, wants to see what mission the CIA have for them. Ritter says a CIA member is being held hostage, and there isn't much information on their adversaries. They immediately start their mission and infiltrate their targeted base and shoot to kill anyone they see. They clear a room and John sees a tattoo on his enemy, and the hostage has been found. John is confused as their targets are ex-Russian army. They move out but are suddenly ambushed along the way. John gets up to see his dead man and hears Greer down below. As she is being attacked, her remaining unit helps her and takes out enemy assailants, but their hostage rescue from a safehouse mission was in fact an armed Russian depot, a clear lie by their higher-ups. The duo then walks around with their guns drawn, and John gets a wall-bang medal and slices and dices his other attackers. The escape helicopter arrives outside, and the hostage as well as the remaining SEAL team board the chopper, where John tells off his leader for lying, which caused his men's death, and the base behind them gets blown up to nothing but ash. 3 months later in Washington, John is accompanying his pregnant wife Pam to the couch. He then speaks with his friend, who gives them a debrief on how hard a baby is. Elsewhere, one of their other soldiers is also with his family until he walks outside and is suddenly rammed by a van and killed. John and his wife arrive back home, but while this happens, one of his other troops is stopped in the middle of the road and shot dead. That night, John kicks back downstairs as his wife sleeps up top. Some men cut the power to his house and John notices something is up. The perpetrators use night vision goggles and walk upstairs, but John hears creaking and pulls out his pistol. He walks upstairs and the mercenaries then put multiple bullets into his bed. Thinking John is dead, he kills his own man and John starts putting bullets into the armed men. He kills one by one until he too is wounded and drops to the floor with his attacker. The man removes his goggles to show his face and both the men are out of bullets and are wounded bad. The man manages to flee and John crawls on the floor to his wife. Unfortunately, he finds her lifeless in the bed and he can do nothing but cry. He is taken by the ambulance soon enough, and in mission briefing, Ritter announces to all people in the room that 3 attackers were found in John's house, as well as his dead wife. Greer speaks to Ritter after the meeting and wants to understand that whenever she sees him, her world falls apart. In the hospital, John is in critical condition, and has some horrific nightmares to cause him massive unease. Later, he finally awakens to see Greer beside him. He remembers everything, and his heart races as the rage inside boils. Greer has no idea who the men were, but John knows they were professionals and that one managed to escape. He also wants a name to the face, but Greer says she doesn't know, and later on Greer is visited by Secretary Clay. He tells her to sit and talks about her uncle and his admirable military status and quickly starts talking about John. He asks her how much John can be trusted, and John in the meantime has no thought in his sight but finding the man who did this to him. At the CIA headquarters, Greer attends a meeting with the secretary as well as Ritter. Their meeting begins and Ritter tells the others that the men were Russians, but his boss at the CIA is closing the case shut, saying 3 of each team died and she doesn't want to poke the bear any further with such little evidence. The secretary and Greer are shocked, and Greer makes her way to John to relay the bad news to him that the CIA will not continue any investigations going forward. Nonetheless, she goes against orders and hands him the 3 dead men's IDs as well as who issued their passports. That night, John returns home to the crime scene. This was supposed to be the start of his new family, but instead it's the end of it. He heads downstairs and begins dismantling the place to grab weapons and cash he was hiding. The rage inside him is burning him up, and he is going to satisfy the monster inside of him. Deeper into the night, he walks to the Russian embassy acting as if he's not sober and spots the man he's looking for, and when he does, he walks the other way. After jumping into his truck, he calls the cops and says an SUV in front of him flashed a gun at him and fakes to be scared. Not too long after this, John intentionally collides with the Russian's car. He empties petrol all around the SUV and sets it ablaze. He jumps into the car and speaks to the Russian and puts a bullet in his leg when he's too quiet. He puts another in the man's chest and the Russian reveals a name as John gets out of the car with his hands in the air and is arrested. At the Pentagon, the secretary watches a news reporter speak about the death of the Navy SEALs by Russians, and Ritter says it was not the CIA who leaked the information, and it must have been Greer. The secretary isn't too fazed and says that John has shaken a tree and is very interested to see who else falls from it. Greer, meanwhile, visits John and tells him he ruined everything, but John is not happy and tells Greer he fought for them for years and they couldn't even help him find his wife's killer. But now all will play by his rules, and he wants Greer to send a message to the secretary but wants to be out of prison before he tells him what it is. He is then escorted away and funnily enough is inside a prison full of Russian mobsters. Almost immediately, John hears Russians outside his door and is quite anxious to what is to be fold in front of him. The guard then tells him to get on his feet and face the wall. He refuses though, and the guard is not happy to hear this. John then gets ready, knowing that it's about to get really violent. He floods the floor, and in comes the guards where John decimates them one at a time. He even breaks the sink and tells the men to close the door. They do so, and more armored men approach, but a marshal calmly approaches the door and slides in a phone. On the phone, Greer tells him to follow the marshal to his freedom. They tell the truth, and John is transported out of this mob-infested prison and to a warehouse. He meets Greer there and is introduced to the secretary as well as Sarah and Ritter. They want to know what he knows, and he says that Viktor Rykov was the fourth gunman at his house who escaped. Sarah says he is dead but is one of the worst criminals ever seen to the American society. They then show 10 faces on the screen to test John, but he answers correct, and the room falls silent knowing they have a big problem on their hands. The secretary wants to hunt down Viktor, but both he and Greer do not want John on the mission. After a bit of convincing though, the secretary changes his mind and allows John to join on the condition he goes back to jail afterwards. Their mission isn't that easy though. They must head to Russia and become invisible as well as cover their tracks behind them. John annoys Greer on the plane and asks why she said he shouldn't join the mission, and she says he is messed up. Feeling responsibility for the death of his wife and kids, John's aim is to murder Viktor. They finally arrive at the drop zone in the Barents Sea, and John says to abort when Russian planes are nearby. The pilot tries talking his way out of the trouble, but a missile is launched at them, and they brace for impact. The plane begins falling to the water, and everyone is told to get in their seats as they crash, and water fills the hub. The Navy SEAL team slowly attempt to get out of the plane, but John heads back for the gear. But as the plane sinks, John still swims through it and into the back where he gets some air. He then grabs all the equipment and uses it to float to air level where his squad is waiting for him. They all jump on a little boat and head to the shore of Murmansk. They get off the boat and hide there the night. The next morning, John tells his squad that maybe the plane crashing was no coincidence, and that Ritter's is too suspicious for his liking. The squad quickly ambush a warehouse where they find Ritter along with some Russians exchanging money. John has heard enough rubbish and threatens to kill Ritter, who says he is paying them to find Viktor, and the Russians confirm this. But John does not believe it one bit and holds a gun to his head and almost makes him drop. Seems the CIA thinks the team was dead, but the mission continues, and they drive inside a van through the streets of Russia. They head to their new base of operations for the time being, and John spots Viktor and almost pulls the trigger, but stops as his entire team would be revealed in the process. At night, they sneak through the streets and enter Viktor's apartment building. They go upstairs and John tells the team to hold on. He then rushes ahead and locks them out. He wants Viktor to pay for what he done, but someone calls John's name from the shadow. It's Viktor, but he says that he is also part of the CIA, which is very confusing to John. Viktor is strapped to some explosives and wants to speak, not fight. His team also approaches from behind, and it turns out Viktor is doing this for America, and John backs up as Viktor detonates the trigger. His team is fine as well as him, but they need to move, and boom. Their men begin getting shot at and killed by a sniper. This was all staged, and they are all pinned down. This sniper is no joke, but John manages to spot his location and provide cover fire for his men as a second sniper also fires. A shootout takes place between the two buildings and their men are wounded and forced into a room. They need to find an exit where the sniper cannot see, and the police then arrive at the scene. But problematically, the sniper shoots down the cops, and John says they wanted us to find the dead Russians at his house in order to head to Russia and be staged for a bombing and killing of police officers. Everything from day dot was all a setup, and it seems they are trying to start a war. It's time to get out of there, but the snipers aren't letting them breathe. They make a hole in the wall, and as many cops arrive on the scene, Greer finds a sniper and punches on with him as John scales the walls outside the apartments. Greer manages to hurt her sniper, then kill him as John comes inside. The duo then tells the team it's time to go. They help their injured troops, but there is a massive problem right now. They need to escape from an army of police officers without being seen, and just like that, one of their own dies on the spot. The police then start raiding places nearby, and John has a plan for them, to get to the top of the building and create a distraction for his team to escape and prevent a war that their corrupt higher-ups tried to start. As he is a felon, there is no issue with him dying, and he heads upstairs immediately. On the rooftop, he blows up a cop car and fires at their vehicles. He clearly misses, giving his team the time to escape back into the van. They drive through the wreckage, and John is shot at from behind but takes out his attackers until he is pinned down. He is then shot in the shoulder and jumps downstairs where he fights off a man and kills him, but more approach him, and he throws multiple smoke bombs around the place and walks down the stairs. Fighting off multiple assailants, he is noticed as he grabs his equipment bag. He shoots back this time and kills off the surrounding men. He then throws his bag, causing a big enough explosion to hurt all troops around him. With smoke, he disguises himself and slowly walks outside and into an ambulance. He drives off and takes off the mask to breathe as he makes it back to Greer, who cannot believe her eyes. She takes off his gear and makes her way to a boat that is waiting for them. Ritter even helps John and they all get inside. The boat takes off and all three are discussing their plan of action. Ritter is off John's hook and even offers John a duffel bag full of money so he can escape. But to all, he must have died. This works out in their favor if they want to find out who is behind all this. Back at home, the secretary sees a reporter speaking on US and Russia tensions. He then gets up to use the bathroom and guess who's there waiting for him. The secretary is surprised to see him, but John explains why he went ghost and how the whole thing was a CIA mission to cause problems with Russia. When John mentions how Victor triggered the bomb, the secretary already knew what happened even though it was left out of the report. John seems to have caught him red-handed and knocks him out to take him for a nice drive. John gives the secretary a chance to explain why his wife, daughter, and team was killed. He also speaks about the secretary's daughter and wife and threatens them, to which he quickly reveals he never met Victor before. He goes on to give this big speech about how unified Americans were when they were at war with the Soviets. A purpose which increased wealth and everything else in America and all the people need is an enemy to put a target on. John wants the secretary to apologize to his wife and throws the car into the water. As they drown, he screams Pam's name until he is submerged. He quickly stops moving as the car hits the bottom, but John's lungs can easily handle this. But he just sits there. He has a memory of speaking to his wife. He misses her with all his heart and joins her side by side in the graveyard. The country pays their respects to the fallen hero, and Greer takes a walk to her van. Inside it though, John laughs at his own funeral, and we see that Greer had saved him. It also turns out John recorded the entire conversation, which is played from Ritter to his higher-ups. At a station, John bids Greer farewell for the time being. Seems Ritter also sorted him out a new name and passport. With that he says goodbye and he walks the other way. In an end credit scene, a year has passed and Ritter has been promoted to the director. John says he has an idea for a new team of hand-picked troops made up of US as well as other NATO members with all support from all international services and wants to present it to the president. Ritter tells him it's good to have him back, and the movie ends. Thanks for staying until the end. Make sure to subscribe and like if you enjoyed it. Thank you.